Due to the following CBS School Break special, Magnum PI will not be seen today. It will be broadcast tomorrow in the regular time period.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It's time again for another Word Balloon Live, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Really happy to welcome Robert Greenberger back to Word Balloon. Good to see you, Bob.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to be here, John.
Well, you know, on the one hand, it's a sad occasion because we're remembering a woman that has passed, but it's also a celebration of a wonderful career and a wonderful life. And I'm talking about the great Ramona Fradon. There she is. Holding up a couple great sketches, and we got a lot of great black and white and color stuff to share. Bob, I'll tell you, I saw Gail Simone gush about this book that Dynamite put out a couple years ago, The Art of Ramona Fradon. You were the editor of it. Howard Chaykin did a great one-on-one interview with Ramona. Walter Simonson did a tremendous forward to the book. What a career. And yeah, man, it's a good excuse. I just said, if I knew, I just talked to Howard like 2 weeks ago, and I totally forgot that he had done the interview. But I'm like, well, Bob edited the book, so let me talk to Bob.
You know, the interesting thing is that this, I guess Howard started this back in 2011, and he had done the interviews, and I guess he talked to Nick Barucci at Dynamite about turning it into a book. Walt's intro is dated 2011. I don't recall coming onto the book until much later, 2012 easily. And as I was reading through the manuscript, I was finding gaps and stuff. So I asked Howard, you know, how he felt about my reaching out to Ramona directly to fill those in. So Ramona and I had a 90-minute conversation where I weaved in the answers and perspectives into Howard's one-on-one with her, and then put the book together. It's, you know, covers her career right up through 2013 when the book came out. What the amazing part is, she was just chugging for another decade.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah, man. And really, what a great run. Any person that makes it to their 90s, it's like you won, man. You did great. And if you know, and she was so sweet. Or you know, a very good woman to see one-on-one. What were you going to say about her, man?
Well, I was going to point out that, you know, you look at people like Ramona and Cy Barry and some of the other veterans like Ken Bald, who made it into their 90s and didn't stop. You know, the lesson there is, maybe they cut back and slowed down, but they never stopped. And they were still making convention appearances or doing creative projects. I mean, Ramona always showed up at a convention with all these brand new sketches in black and white and color that she had done to sell at the conventions, to, you know, to fund everything. But she was still drawing right up until, you know, the last 6 weeks of her life, which I think is incredible.
Agreed. Absolutely, man. A friend of mine, Steve Raisky, always points out the first time I met Ramona was at probably 2008, the New York Comic Con, or 2009. And being a bull in a china shop, she was drawing, and I accidentally bumped into her table while she was drawing.
Whoops.
And and dude, I'm telling you, man, daggers in her eyes. And I felt so horrible. But thankfully, subsequent encounters, she was always great. And I bought several pieces. I'm going to show pieces from the book. But you know what I love too, Robert, is the profiles, and I'm assuming you put them in the Dynamite book, of all the other editors that she worked with over the years. And this really is a really well-rounded look at Ramona's entire career.
You know, the bulk of her work for DC was originally with George Cashton and Murray Boltinoff, you know, so they're very influential in developing her career as a DC artist. Later, when she was doing Plastic Man and Super Friends, it was multiple editors and it wasn't the same sort of working relationship. So Murray certainly loomed large in her life.
That's amazing. And also her husband, too. I had no idea that wasn't he an artist as well?
He was an artist, advertising, the New Yorker, if I recall. It's real interesting that they were both creative people drawn together. Clearly, it didn't last, but he did not hold her back.
Yeah, that's really amazing, and also too, for a woman that started in essentially, the Silver Age, Golden Age. Would you call the start of her career technically the Golden Age?
Well, technically, yes, because those early Shining Knight and Gangbuster stories were from the 40s.
There you go.
And she was working her way through the 50s. She really hit her peak, obviously, coming onto Aquaman and Adventure Comics, working with Robert Bernstein and some of the other writers. But no, she was, chugging those stories out with regularity and always staying busy, taking time to raise her daughter.
Yeah, and again, these are sketch images from later on, but in the book, it's fantastic. There are pages of interiors and covers all throughout her career, and it was interesting to see, like you said, Shiny Knight, one of the first characters she touched, and Black Hawk as well. And then, like you said, I mean, good Lord, the two signature looks, of course, were Aquaman and, of course, Metamorpho.
For Aquaman, it was real interesting for her because it was just another assignment that turned into something regular. It sort of fell into it because Murray needed somebody, and it was the right person at the right time, and was there for the Silver Age incarnation of Aquaman with the new origin, and then the addition of Aqualad and all. And then, came onto the book. Helped create a style as people were becoming more aware of comics all over again.
Yeah, absolutely. It was that Silver Age of the 50s when she went to Aquaman, and it was in adventure. And this is really, Aquaman was kind of a backup feature in adventure. Superboy was the lead feature, but this was kind of that area of right before or during Showcase 4 when when Barry Allen's Silver Age Flash came on the scene. And also just her art. My God, these faces. I mean, Brenda Starr, look at that face, my God. And also the storybook quality that was perfect for where comics were being aimed at the 10-year-olds in terms of just the gorgeous art that she would provide.
What's interesting is DC always had a very clean house style that evolved in the late 40s, but really took hold in the 1950s, especially after the Comics Code was instituted just at the cusp of the Silver Age. But stylistically, Ramona's softer, rounder lines, they were very clean, really hewed more to Dick Sprang than the Kurt Swans who were coming on, and Al Plastino, who were really part of that look of the 50s.
I hear you, man. Absolutely. No, that's totally true. God, here's what I love, and this is the 60s with Metamorpho. Jeez, that face is so terrific. And I love, too, that in the interview with Howard, she describes how at first she was trying to figure out a costume for Metamorpho, but then realized because he was the Element Man to have his whole body really kind of represented in the different elements and everything. It's funny, I was talking to Mike Allred, and given the weirdness of a lot of his stuff, I'm like, Mike, have you ever drawn Ultra, the multi-alien, who also had a similar vibe to Metamorpho? And he's like, I don't know that character. I'm like, oh my God. So I sent him a bunch of covers, and I'm like, dude, you've got to draw Ultra at some point. And yeah, Metamorpho, man, I the whole thing of Metamorpho, I think is so fantastic.
I mean, clearly it was Haney and Boltinoff at the beginning, but once as legend has it, at some point they were offering it to Romita to keep him at DC when Marvel was sniffing around.
Wow.
And I guess this is Ramona did only the first handful of issues of Metamorpho and then moved on. So I guess before Joe Orlando and Sal Trapani and some of the others filled in for the rest of the run, I guess they offered it to John Romita Jr. Sr. And imagine if he's took it.
No kidding. How different the world would have been. Of course, we know that, Spider-Man started with, the first cover is a Kirby cover of Amazing Fantasy 15, but the interiors were Ditko. But yeah, what if John Sr. never really went to Spider-Man and brought that wonderful romance style of his to Spider-Man?
So, Ramona, when she was brought on for Metamorpho, it was the first time in her life she was really brought in at the beginning of a project, and her input was invited and welcomed and treated as an equal, which was so unusual. One, from Murray's line of books, and two, for DC at all.
Yeah, she's kind of like Marie Severin at Marvel, was kind of the girl in the clubhouse,
Right.
and in that Mad Men sort of era of men only. And in fact, again, the interview that Howard did is just so great. And I think really Ramona, said, no, I was never comfortable. When did she start going to the bullpen rather than just bring her work in?
Had to have been around, just I want to get this right because she's left DC for a stretch, came back from Metamorpho and all, did some Brave and Bolds, but left for a couple of years because of her daughter. And I'm going to guess it's around the time she left to raise her daughter, she was getting uncomfortable. Because DC was very much a product of the 50s without the gloss of the Mad Men, but definitely more to the company's roots from the racy pulps of the 30s.
Sure. No, I hear you. You're absolutely right. God, Gerard Jones has unfortunately got arrested and had some personal problems. His Men of Tomorrow book really does kind of lay out the beginnings of national periodicals.
And a lot of those people were still on staff or had been brought in by those very people. So it was very much the boys' club. There are definitely stories that have been handed down through the years that we will take as gospel for some of the way women were mistreated there. She herself never experienced that, but certainly was not, comfortable with some of what she heard or saw, perhaps.
I hear you, man. Absolutely. Couple comments. Everybody, listen, we got a lot of people watching. Please dive in with questions or comments if you want. Mark says, never had the pleasure of meeting Ramona, but was lucky enough to buy 3 pieces from her art dealer, including the Brenda Starr daily strip that was published the day I was born. And then Jay says, thanks for doing this. Mr. Greenberger is always a great guest. I agree. Look forward to being informed and educated. Well, I think we're getting that. And that's great. I
want to add, well, on the one hand, she was circumspect about her experiences at DC in the 50s and I guess 60s. It's real interesting to see just how blunt she got about working with Dale Messick. It's very, very much the opposite because up to her dying day, she really talked about what a grind and how unpleasant it was. And, she wasn't crazy about the stories. June Brigman has certainly talked about what it was like inheriting the book from Ramona and, some of the things she was told, just, I guess the grind of the strip and the nature of the storyline just wasn't satisfying to her.
Also interesting to note that she really didn't feel comfortable doing comic book work until the 70s when she was doing things like Super Friends and Plastic Man. I think that's kind of insane because, good Lord, I mean, the talent was there. And, even the Boys Club of DC had to acknowledge how great she was.
I have no idea how artists think in that sense about their own work. I take her at her word that she didn't feel comfortable. Maybe it's that adage of, 10,000 hours of practice before you get good or comfortable at anything. And I guess the 50s and 60s were her 10,000 hours. But, before she came back to DC for Plastic Man, it's just wild to imagine Roy reaching out to her to draw an issue of the Fantastic Four. It's just,
yes.
I give Roy all the credit in the world for thinking of her and trying to bring her over to Marvel to work, but her style and what Marvel was publishing at the time were just not a good fit, if you ask me.
I hear what you're saying, man. No, I've got again a couple examples from the book, not the FF, but here's the cat on the right, and I forget the name of the character on the left.
Well, that's still the cat. That's still that's the Splash.
Oh, sure. Okay, so without her mask and everything, that's cool. I had no idea that she ever did any Marvel stuff. One of the pieces that I have, and it's tucked away, I haven't framed them yet, but I have her a Namor sketch of hers, and I thought that was ironic fun, given her association with Aquaman. It's like, well, all right, here she is with Namor. The last piece I bought, it was the first Baltimore Comic-Con right after COVID. So right when we were finally coming out, she wasn't there, but her two dealers were there, and I bought a Green Arrow sketch, and it's Silver Age Green Arrow without the beard, clean shaven Green Arrow. But I love it, man. And no, I've got those, and I've got a the time I bumped her table, I made sure to buy a piece for her, always reasonably priced. Good Lord. I mean, these are 5x8 sketches, the first two, but I bought a Metamorpho from her as well. All three pieces were under $100, which is insane. I'm like, my God, this woman is such a, I mean, even when I first met her and stuff, it's like, it's Ramona Fradon. Good Lord. I grew up on Metamorpho and the designs that she had. So yeah, it was incredible.
Had I gotten home from school 5 minutes earlier, I would have been able to dig out my sketchbook. I had mailed it to Ramona and I asked for a sketch. And because this sketchbook tends to be female centric, I said, any woman you want, Sapphire to Mirror, whatever. She clearly had flipped through the book, and there was a Tom Zoller piece of one of his characters, the female lead from his Love and Cape series, in bed, talking about her dreams. And, it was a little bit cheeky, a little bit sexy. Couple pages later, there's Ramona with Sapphire in bed imitating that, but she's dreaming of Rex, and there's a picture of him in her hand. But it was just so nice and so clever of her.
That's great, man. And I love. It's so funny. She kind of projected herself as Sapphire, and it's hilarious because again, brunette woman and everything, and but I love it. I love that she kind of felt like she was putting herself in Metamorpho as Sapphire Stagg, which is just outstanding. Here, I got a great. This is. I love this shot.
Oh no!
Come on, man. Sure. And also, was it her brother that she made Java there with the yeah. Oh, and again, that's the great thing about the Metamorpho series was that it was comedy and action at the same time. And again, just that blind devotion, not blind. I mean, she, Sapphire loved Rex, and even after he became a freak, it's like, no, I don't care. This is the man I love, which was kind of great.
I say this in Ramona's book when I wrote about Murray, and it comes up periodically, but everyone has to remember he had incredible commercial instincts. His mystery books outsold Joe Orlando's House of Mystery, House of Secrets in the 70s. But in the 60s, when he went from an associate editor to a full editor, had his own line of books, and was freed from the shackles of management above him, he did some incredibly experimental work. Metamorphosis is just one of them. And, they didn't all connect, but boy, he was willing to try anything to be entertaining. And, we love Metamorpho because it connects to us because of that romance and because of that tonality. It wasn't all, gloom and doom and, oh my God, I'm stuck in this body and I hate myself. Oh no, I'm going to give it to, Simon Stagg and Java as often as I can.
Absolutely, man. Murray and Bob Haney as well, the B&B boys, and what they did in Brave and Bold. I mean, I was an avid reader in the 70s, and who cares about continuity? It's like, no, we want to see Batman and Sergeant Rock. We want to see Batman and Wildcat. I love those Jim Aparo Batman Wildcat team ups and stuff. And it was, again, I was too little to care about nitpicking on continuity and stuff. It's like, these are fantastic.
for me, yes, Bob Haney was incredibly creative, and he clearly told good solid stories and found ways to mesh the characters together, often without reading anything these other characters had been in. But my first exposure to Ramona were her issues of The Brave and the Bold. And I distinctly remember looking at her Batman Green Lantern story going, there's something different about this art from what I'm reading over in Julie's Batman and Detective books. And it was softer and more rounded. And it was very appealing, but I had no idea, I was really young at the time, but even then I could tell her stuff stood apart from the others.
Absolutely. And then as she was doing her sketches, in her later years, I just loved things like this. I mean, can you imagine if Aquaman actually did come across Captain America in the ice like this? Outstanding. Yep. Oh, so great, man. Just outstanding.
I really, really give DC kudos. I don't know if you've got JPEGs for this, but the last piece of Ramona's work are 3 covers she did for Women's History Month that's coming out in March.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, no. Trish Mulvihill posted them a couple right after she died because she just finished coloring them. But they work as a triptych, and they're going to be 3 variant covers, and it's her last published work, and it's all the female DC heroes, and it's just she still had it in 96 years old. She still had it, which is so incredible.
And I blew it, Bob. I met her and I said, would you be willing to do a podcast interview? And she said, well, if you send me the questions in advance so I can really think about them and stuff. And I don't know, I blew it with Joe Kubert as well. Mm-hmm. And Joe's another guy that had it till the end. And I was loving the Kubert Presents that DC was putting out there in his last months. Mm-hmm. And it was just, what a loss. And I'm glad I met him. Palmiotti and Amanda did me the solid of introducing me to Joe, and are like, oh no, John's a good guy. You should talk to him and stuff, Joe. And he was amazing. But yeah, it's that's so great to hear that she had it right till the end.
Oh yeah, and after we had done the Art of Ramona Fradon book, I had started being regularly attending the Baltimore Comic-Con, and I got to do a spotlight interview with her. And in advance, I just said, look, I'm going to ask you all the same questions I asked you on the phone, so you know the answers already. And we went through the career and we did it. And there should be a YouTube video version of it somewhere out there.
Oh, I hope so.
That was
How long ago, Bob?
Well, this was
around the time of the book.
It was 2013, 14, 15, something after the book came out in 2013.
Sure.
And what was great is she was such a regular at Baltimore. I'd always spend time at her table, just catching up with her. So it was like a once a year thing I really looked forward to.
I don't blame you, man. Well, and I should point out again, and man, Gail Simone really did my field work. If people want to read the book, it's available on Kindle's Unlimited, but it does look like they still have copies there. I didn't really check on eBay. I hope Dynamite does put the book back out.
I wouldn't mind if they added a signature to bring things up to date.
Yeah.
Just to wrap up the career in one place. Now that you mentioned it, I probably should reach out to them and see if they're interested.
Yeah, man, absolutely. No, I was going to float Barucci a message and say,
please do.
No, absolutely, man. Because I think definitely, people need to know. I mean, it's the same thing with Marie Severin, who sadly, I know, God, what was it called? Was it Womanthology? I know they really wanted her. This is like 15 years ago. They really wanted her to be part of that book, Marie Severin. And her family's like, listen, she's retired. She can't,
she had health issues.
Yeah.
And she had to withdraw from the public eye and had to be respected. She just was not up to it. It is a shame that, like Ramona and Marie didn't do a tour together at cons when they could.
Totally.
Because, Marie started at EC with her brother, John Severin. And survived the Marvel purges and, was so integral to helping Stan get that company up and running and did so much art that, I don't think people realize is her. A lot of covers for Tales to Astonish and all.
Right. And great Namor artist, along with the funny stuff she did at Not Brand Ec. And,
yes. Oh, God. As a caricaturist, she was unparalleled.
Well, and I know the Two Morrows guys over the years in Alter Ego and other magazines and stuff have shown not only her pages and her covers, but Christmas cards and just fun sketches of Herb. Like I know I saw a Herb Trimpe sketch that Marie did and everything. Yeah, man. I mean, it is really great that in the modern era now, there are so many wonderful women creators out there who are doing incredible work. And God, I think of when I started Word Balloon, and it was like, well, there's Gail Simone. Okay. And again, if you knew your Bronze Age history, you knew about, a lot of the great writers and artists and stuff from the 70s and even the 80s, the Anisettis and people like that. And Devin Grayson in the 90s, certainly, and in the early 2000s. And, Kelly Sue DeConnick coming through in the late aughts and into the 2010s. And now, the avalanche of people, but it's like, hey, man, Ramona was there, decades earlier and doing top line work.
It's interesting that a lot of the female artists from the Golden Age, there were a bunch of uncredited letterers and inkers who were women at Timely and at a lot of the other companies that were around at the time, but National/DC didn't. I mean, it really was a boys' club from the outset. Ramona may have been the first to do regular work for them. I would have to, check that, but that's my impression.
Understood. Let's, man, how about her Brenda Starr period? And here's a black and white version of the Sunday strip. This is when I was reading Brenda Starr back in the early 80s. And,
there's enough Dale Messick in there and Ramona. You can really pick out the differences. So it was an interesting blend of the styles.
But she apparently, go on.
I want to recount for those who may not have read her obit in the New York Times or in the Art of Ramona book. But, there's this great story. The syndicate never received a week's worth of strips while she was at the San Diego Comic-Con. And she mentioned to somebody, I can't be at the show today. I have to redraw everything.
Wow.
And, basically the artist community said, you draw, we'll ink, come sit with us.
Wow.
And the pages were being passed around from table to table. Someone would do heads, someone would do backgrounds. Everyone wanted to basically ink Ramona, to thank Ramona, to also to help her out when there was this jam, and the strips got done in like a day and a half or something. And so the syndicate was delighted. Ramona was floored by the outpouring of people, and people like Al Williamson said, I missed it. I wanted to ink her.
That's so terrific. No, I've never heard that story. That's wonderful.
Yeah. No, it's in the New York Times obit. Mark Evan Year's blog about Ramona last couple of weeks also talks about it in some great detail, so you can see all the names there. But it's like a murderer's row of inkers just stepping up to bail her out.
That's amazing. That's like that classic story of when Timely had the Human Torch and Submariner, and I don't know who the creator, like whose idea was first, but hey, let's put them together. And I want it on my desk Monday, and there was that massive artist jam session. I think that
for a weekend.
Yeah, and I don't know. Yeah, Carl Burroughs, of course, was the torch.
Yeah, Burgos and Everett were the ringleaders, but everybody
Everett was the Submariner artist. Yeah, no, and exactly, man, and there's stories of guys in the bathtub with their sketchbook drawing and stuff, and getting
apparently that. It was 1947 to 1948. There was a snowstorm in Manhattan, and a bunch of artists were trapped in the studio jamming out pages. It is a story that Bob Kane stole for his autobiography, but it happened to Bill Finger and a bunch of the other guys. Joe Robinson and the other guys. It's Jerry's story.
I understand.
But that speaks to the community. When there's a problem, the community comes together and gets the job done.
100%. And again, interesting to read the different other publishers beyond National that Ramona worked for. She worked for initially Victor Fox.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. I was just talking about Victor Fox with Christopher Irving, I know, who's prepping a scholarly paper on Fox and Fox Comics. Absolutely.
I've read some of the Fox court transcripts, and I know the legend and whatever Jerry Jones put in his book. But that's something I would look forward to. But good for Victor for hiring her.
100%, man. Yeah, again, it's you couldn't deny that talent. So yeah, tell me more about this this rub she had with the Brenda Starr creator Dale Messick.
Apparently, Dale Messick was a egocentric, maybe narcissist, who liked to do things her way and had a particular bent to her stories that Ramona, just had trouble accepting. This is not how a real reporter would do stuff, or the relationship with Basil St. John just kept going in circles, that sort of thing. And I guess really put her, really ground down her enthusiasm for drawing. The daily grind, the deadline, any comic strip artist will tell you the grind is so much harder than a 22-page story in a month. And it just wore on her, but she stuck with it for years because that was her living. She had stepped away from DC to pick up Brenda Starr at Dale's request. Dale, through the syndicate, reached out to her and made that offer. And, she was doing it for over a decade, and she was done.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, and again, that's amazing. I know regarding Little Orphan Annie, one of the women that took over the scripting for it was Mary Schmeek, who was a great news reporter for, I want to say, the Chicago Tribune. Not to say, yeah, probably, of course it was the Tribune, because that was Annie's home. Yeah. I keep meaning to contact Mary. Mary's still around. I'd love to get her point of view on writing Annie as a real reporter. Basil St. John, of course, one of Brenda's great loves, her great love. There he is there at the eye patch and the Silver Temples.
Yep.
The movie unfortunately did not live up to the strength of the comic strip, much like the Doc Savage movie with Ron Ely. It's like, all right, well, you tried.
Well, the intentions are there, but the execution either was budget or, the Brenda Starr movie was at a time where the studios said, yeah, we'll pick up the name because everybody knows the name. We'll ignore everything else without giving the audiences what they expected, which was the strip.
Absolutely. No question. And again, these are people that would follow the strip every day. God, I'm looking. I hope I grabbed this. I'm looking for the crossover between Brenda and Dick Tracy that is in the book. Did I grab it? I hope I did. I'm looking now. Let's see.
I hope you did.
Yeah, maybe I didn't. Shame on me. But again, well then, another reason to buy the book, everybody. But so Ramona drew that because she really, you could tell whoever was currently drawing Tracy at the time. I don't remember, and now I'm misremembering who drew the strip when Max Collins was writing Tracy.
Dick Loker.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, I mean, it evoked the Tracy style, but it was different from what we were getting in the Tracy strip, obviously.
No, that's her skill set.
That's okay. Yeah, that's okay. No, there's nothing wrong with that. But I guess I didn't grab it. I apologize, everybody. I wanted to show that because that really blew my mind. And again, it's also there. Tons of interior pages, tons of covers, and all these fantastic black and white sketches through the years up through 2013, and just amazing stuff, man. That Ramona was doing and delighting fans. Oh, there you go. Hold on, everybody. I'm going to zoom in on Bob. There you go, everybody. Yeah, look at that. That's outstanding. That was done for the Tribune Sunday magazine.
Right.
So, much like the New York Times Sunday magazine, which was a nice supplement. Certainly a far cry from what we get these days in our newspapers.
You
I
know,
can, you know,
Ramona, like so many other comic strip artists, were always pressed into doing other stuff featuring Brenda Starr for the Syndicate, promotional things like this, or even licensing art. Not that there was a lot of Brenda Starr licensing.
right, right. You know, it is amazing, Bob, that the strips really were that was the premier job if you could get it. And you
Oh
know,
yeah,
even
I mean, the comic books was for everyone who couldn't get a daily strip, because the money was good, and back then, the early comic strip artists were celebrities. You know, Milton Caniff and Hal Foster were like Alex Raymond. They were celebrated. You know, if they showed up at Sardi's, they were bold type in the gossip columns. You know, they showed up on radio programs and some of the early TV shows. Being a comic strip artist, especially for a well-known national strip, you know, Al Cap and Little Abner, and
yes,
of course, you know, the guys behind Blondie and Mutt and Jeff and all. They were raking it in, and that's where Bob Kane in particular desperately wanted to reach the level of you know, Raymond and these guys,
yeah,
to basically hire someone to ghost it for them and just be the celebrity and do a
absolutely.
little bit of art.
I
And that's what he tried to replicate with his own little house studio, producing the Batman pages before DC hired the guys away.
yes, exactly with the Kane story. No, you're right. I read Dennis Kitchen, and I forget his co-author of Al Cap's biography,
Mm-hmm.
and I, you know, I never knew that Frank Frazetta was ghosting for Al Cap.
Oh yeah, I mean, it. You know, you find those reprinted somewhere. You can kind of look for his line if you know what to look for. It's just incredible that he had that kind of versatility to be able to do the Al Cap slapstick humor of the strip, and then go on to do that voluptuous science fiction stuff for EC.
Absolutely, man. You
Yeah.
know, I love that King Features, and I know Tribune does this too. They offer the ability digitally now to compile your own daily comic strip pages, like we would get in the newspapers. And also, not only do you get modern stuff, but you can also get retro stuff as well. And for a couple of years, I was reading Dan Barry, Flash Gordon, and Big Ben Bolt, the boxing adventure
Oh,
that
John Cullen Murphy,
yeah,
sure.
Colin Murphy, absolutely, man. You know, I tried so hard to get his son on when
Okay,
Cullen wrote that Cartoon Nation or whatever it was
right.
about the area in Connecticut where all the cartoonists lived, and then would, you know, get on the train and deliver their strips to New York and everything.
It was a pretty good book.
It's a really good. I thought it was great.
Yeah, you know, the thing was, you had to be within community distance of New York to be a comic strip or comic book artist.
Absolutely.
When Sprang moved to Arizona in the mid 40s, that was the exception, where he was mailing his pages in. Everybody else, you know, you were told you got to be, you know, we got to be able to reach you.
Yeah. No, and again, this is, I mean, younger people don't realize. I mean, certainly, forget about digital. Even the idea of Federal Express and, you know, sending your pages that way and overnight delivery or a couple days delivery. No, man. And like you said, the grind of doing 5 days a week plus a Sunday strip, I can only imagine. I'm so glad that Eisner did that Shop Talk book and really went into detail with guys like Kniff about
Yeah,
that grind.
yeah. I mean, you know, that was fascinating artist to artist conversations from that generation, where they knew each other well enough to get into the stories and talk in the shorthand. And, you know, it's a glimpse, merely a glimpse into what that was like. But, you know, you mentioned this, the using FedEx really was an early 80s thing. As early as as late as 1980, when you needed to ship something, you would stand in line at the post office for, you know, express, whatever their express was called at the time.
Sure.
I had to do it a couple of times for the Detective 500 jam cover when I was on staff in the summer of '80. Paul would say, "Here, take this, send it to Carmine." He was like, "Whatever." It wasn't Carmine, but it was like Walt or whoever was the next person on the jam
production line. Yeah.
But you're
the artists. Okay. Yeah. The artists.
The post office on this long line. It's just not efficient. And then, of course, when DC was in a time crunch, you had to send something for Saturday delivery. You needed special permission because it cost more.
Wow. Different times, everybody. Different
times. I mean, now it's digital. Scan it, and it's there in seconds.
So, Bob, you're teaching now. What? And what school and what are you teaching?
Well, in addition to my high school life here in Maryland, this is my second semester at the Maryland Institute College of Art. It's a course for seniors, and it's called Making Graphic Novels. The comic illustration minor that they offer is coordinated by Jose Villarrubia, and Carla Speed McNeil, and I apparently are the department. And they created the class, and Jose asked me to run it because what he needed was a comic book editor. Basically, these seniors come in and have to produce a 30-page graphic story, either as their senior project or senior thesis. So every Wednesday night, the class is scheduled from 4 to 10, but it's not quite so long. They come in and they peer review each other's work while I sit with them one-on-one, and we go through whatever they've done for the week. So I'm looking at scripts. I'm looking at their thumbnails. So we're talking about placement of balloons or figures. Then I'm looking at the artwork, and we talk about anatomy, perspective, whether or not the page flows, inking, lettering, font choice. First semester I had Richard Starkings address them on lettering. This semester I had Tom Zoller talking to them about being a self-published person, because a lot of these people have that goal. They would like to self-publish. So Tom, through his own self-publishing, through his Kickstarter, Patreon, he's got a wealth of experience. So that was incredible. And these are great. I'm dealing with 15 to 18 kids who want to be there, who want to draw and succeed and learn. Now, some lean more towards the story. Others lean more towards the artwork. But they have to learn how to do it all, which is a great training ground.
I think that's fantastic. Yeah.
Not all of them want to be comic book artists when they're said and done. Some want to be animators or storyboard artists. Some want to go into graphic design, but want to understand how storytelling works. I'm here to work with them. And so far, so good. I'll be doing it again in the fall.
That's great, man. And, isn't it interesting that the ambition now is to do creator own versus, and I always ask people in your generation, and even I think a generation after that the pinnacle was working for DC and Marvel for so many years, and now it really is. Now I'm going to make my own thing, and thank God that it's I think the tide has turned in that way in a good way.
It's been an evolution. If you think about it, in the 1970s, creator-owned stuff was this stuff off to the side, starting with Mike Friedrich's Star Reach, and then Jack Katz's The First Kingdom, Cerebus, ElfQuest. But by 78 or so, when Eclipse formed and they did Detectives Inc. with Marshall Rogers and Don McGregor, that started to turn the tide, because now it's a company doing creator-owned stuff.
Yep.
And so it was Eclipse, then Pacific, then First. And it grew. So there were companies doing all this creator-owned stuff. Now people are able to do it on their own because the technology has improved. The sales channels have improved. But it's all evolutionary, and you can all trace it, back to the early 70s.
Even before the 70s, Gil Kane trying with his name is Savage.
1968, yeah.
And Black Mark, was that what it was called? The fantasy book?
Black Mark, which was interesting because he took that to Bantam Books. That was a book approach as opposed to magazine. And, he was well into doing book 2, and I guess book 1 just didn't sell. So it was another decade before, I guess, Fantagraphics put it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got a couple of the not the first release, but the magazine size one that I think Fantagraphics did back in the 80s.
They did a facsimile, if I recall.
Yeah. Pretty cool. Here,
Very,
none of
very
you.
cool. But in that way, Gil was a pioneer in the mold of Eisner.
Yeah.
Underrepresented in the histories because they didn't succeed, but he tried. He
Yeah.
pushed the boundaries. But you're right. And today, when my kids come in and they're making their pitch about what it is they're going to tell, they have to talk about their influences. And it's incredible. A lot of it's manga, a lot of it's European. Very little would be what we consider our traditional American comic publishing. And I find that fascinating because for me, that it's forcing me to go seek out what they're influenced by and read it so I can talk more authoritatively. So that's opened me up, get out of my comfort zone a little, which is nice.
100%, man. No, I'm talking to Dean Haspiel on Monday, and
Good.
we love Dean, of course. God, all of a sudden I'm Trump. We love Dean. We love what he does. Excellent work. But really, he's been doing webtoons. Are you looking at the online comics that are coming out as well?
I try. There are not enough hours in the day. So if someone is pointing me to a specific webtoon, or I look over my students' shoulders at high school and I see that they're reading some webtoon rather than doing my work, I ask what it is that's so interesting. So yeah, I look at some of that stuff, especially if it's people I know like Dean. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Here, none of your business is the guy's name. Switch subject from classes from senior citizens to high schoolers. Was surprised senior citizens were so career ambitious. Maybe he thought when you said seniors, maybe he thought you meant that you're.
No. These are undergraduate seniors, a handful of juniors who got permission to take it. They can take the course more than once. So I've got people who did 30 pages of a longer story last fall that they're finishing this spring. It's real interesting to see some of their ambitions.
Absolutely, man. No, I think that's wonderful. And again, not only to possibly publish a physical book, but you could obviously do a web comic yourself and put it online that way. I know my buddy Dave Wachter, who's killing it these days at all the companies. I remember when he was getting started, 15 years ago, even more, and told a long form story, and once a week he would put up a page of art and everything.
That's how you do it. Partly you're told do that to build your audience, let people find you and make them come back the next week for more. So you build up your traffic. It's a tried and true method.
Absolutely. Bob, remind me, because next time we talk, I really want to go into detail. You wrote a Star Trek novel back in the day, didn't you?
A few.
There you go, man. God, I have this compendium that really is just a list of all the books. Well, anytime I have your buddy Michael Jan Friedman on, I got to talk to him about his Star Trek stuff. So yeah, man. And of course you did your wonderful Star Trek history book. That was one of the first times we spoke.
It is. And while I'm glad I did it because it needed doing, it had some repercussions I wasn't anticipating. So Star Trek remains a love. It is no longer something I'm actively participating in, which makes me sad. But there's other stuff to do.
Did you edit the comic as well when it was?
I did it for 8 years at DC.
Yeah, 8 years. Jesus, man, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So yeah. Oh God, dude, I swear, like that was a great run, and the people like Mike that were writing for the comic.
Yeah,
and and I forget. So tell me some of the artists that were drawing the comic.
Well, I mean, my writers were predominantly Peter David and Michael Jan Friedman. Then Howard Weinstein was part of it.
Okay.
It started with Tom Sutton and Ricardo Villagran as the artists on the Star Trek book. But this is where we put Peter Krause in the public eye on the Star Trek Next Generation. He was, when that book became a monthly, Peter was drawing that. And that's where we debuted Matt Haley as an artist on Star Trek Annual. Gordon Purcell, James Fry.
Sure,
these were my stalwarts.
Yes.
And because today's Gray Morrow's birthday, I have to acknowledge the films he did for me.
Gray Morrow, what a talent. Good Lord. Love all of his comics. When he did a modern day Black Hood for Archie 40 years ago, whenever it was.
In the 80s, yeah.
Yes. Oh, so good, man. I mean, and that's just scratching the surface. But yeah, now you're part of. You mentioned Peter David, you, Paul Kupperberg, Mike Jan Friedman. You guys are all part of Crazy Eights.
Right. Crazy Eight Press is our digital publishing hub, and we write and produce the books we want for what we want to share with our audiences. Sometimes we do collaborative anthologies. So Mike has done a couple of shared world books that we've all written for. I've got my Thrilling Adventure Yarns short story anthologies celebrating the pulps. Peter's got a new novel that fortunately was finished before he took ill last year, and we're having a technical issue. It should be out as soon as we solve it. Don't ask, but it's a lovely story about Robin Hood's daughter.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, exactly. Fun. So, all 10 of us who contribute to it, we're each doing our own thing and trying to have a book out, each month or so. And, we're 11 years in, so something's working.
How's Peter feeling these days?
As I understand it from his wife, Kathleen, they finally got his white blood cell counts where they need to be. He needs to stay infection-free for a couple of consecutive months before they even consider discharging him from his facility. And then there's the physical rehab required because he's effectively been bedridden for over a year now. Yeah, so obviously there's a lot of muscles that need to be rebuilt.
One of my favorite comic writers, one of my favorite Star Trek writers.
And apparently he's still working on some stuff from the hospital bed. So I look forward to new stuff soon.
I had about 5 years ago with a leg infection that held me up for a couple months. And I'm glad to hear that he's able to write. And because again, that could really drive you crazy. Mm-hmm. So, best wishes to Peter. But man, you're Thrilling Adventures again, something we've discussed in the past. And what's going on with your books?
Well, the last volume came out in early 2023, and I'm taking a year off because I needed to get my mica work under control, get a feel for it. My deal with my wife was once I accepted the college gig on top of my high school job, I had to put the writing and editing to the side, except for school breaks. Now that I've had a second semester in on this and I see the time commitment, I'm slowly starting to put plans together, and I hope you and I will be talking over the summer as I kickstart for a 2025 volume.
That sounds great, man. Excellent. So where can people buy your books?
Well, I've got everything of mine listed at bobgreenberger.com. I do have spare copies of some books, including my Ramona Fradon book that I can autograph and sell you directly. Otherwise, I've got links to Amazon. It's www.greenberger.com.
Excellent. Very good. What am I not hitting asking you about Ramona?
She was an incredibly interesting, introspective thinker, and she had done taken herself in her adult life back to college and studied and actually wrote. She calls it a book. Maybe it was a senior thesis or a doctorate. She was a little vague on that, but she clearly wrote something that expressed some philosophical, universal points of view. So there's that side of her that when you're sitting at a convention never really comes up in conversation, but there was more to her life than just comics.
Oh, and, yeah.
Apparently she loved a good drink every now and then when away from the table. And I gathered there were some stories she tells, but she was more than just a comic book artist. She was a mother with a successful daughter. She was interested in the world around her and continued to educate herself. And you have to admire that in somebody, who put all that time into raising her child, putting bread on the table through Brenda Starr, and still gone to school to enrich herself.
Man, Vastra, good point. Or Vasta, pardon me, or Varsta. I apologize for mangling your name. But I agree, her Brenda Starr needs to be collected. That would be amazing.
Talk to Dean Mullaney. I mean, he's the only guy these days who's collecting strips. You know, the Library of American Comics.
That's right. Well, Clover Press, I think, also.
Oh, they've been doing stuff.
And Hermes. There is Hermes as well. I don't know who the man is in charge of Hermes, but I know they're doing comic strip collections as well.
Well, that's Daniel Herman, and he seems to be, very limited. He's done some Buck Rogers. He's doing all the Phantom stuff. Dark Shadows, I think he did.
Did Big Ben Bolt. I know I bought that from him.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So Daniel Herman's the guy there. So there are a couple of places, but, the Machine. Actually, Clover, now that they're doing Terry and the Pirates, they're up there too.
Yeah. And again,
editions.
And also I spoke to Michael Vasulo, who's doing this wonderful work on the Atlas comic books of the 50s.
Right.
And that's great. But, it's a shame, Bob. I wish beyond people our age that there was a bigger audience for this stuff, because it's really both story and art, really sophisticated storytelling in the comic form that, God, my buddy Chris Somney loves going back and finding the great collections that Mulvaney and people at IDW and the other publishers who have put out these amazing collections and stuff. I'm glad that's happening.
Nostalgia is cyclic. When I was when I was a teenager in the 1970s, there was this Marx Brothers revival, as well as the Shadow and Doc Savage pulp paperback reprints.
Oh yeah.
And then they faded away. And then, in the 2000s, Tony Tolan started his facsimiles of Doc Savage and the Shadow. So, it goes in these cycles, and I'm kind of hoping comic strips are the next thing to cycle up in interest. And maybe when Mad Cave does their Alex Raymond collection this summer as part of their Flash Gordon rollout, maybe that can spark something.
I hear you, man. No, you're right about that. And not just Raymond, but as I said, too, I have a couple soft cover collections of Dan Barry's Flash and everything.
Oh,
no,
sure.
I hear you.
Yeah, the Macro Boy stuff that was between Raymond and Austin Briggs, before Barry took it in the 50s, those are worth looking at too.
God, yes. No, well, any Mac Ray boy. Isn't it interesting? I love, and again, we could talk about this, the comparison to what C.C. Beck and Schaffenberger were doing with Captain Marvel. And then you got Mac Rayboy, who, much like Ramona, had this wonderful, almost children's book style to his art. And I'll throw up that great shot of Aquaman and Aqualad.
Okay.
God, it's is it this one? Yes. There we go. Yeah, I mean, and Rayboy kind of in his own way, obviously, and then preceding Ramona had that amazing. When you see the Captain Marvel Jr. stuff, it was a totally different art style.
And what's interesting is when you get to the Mary Marvel stuff, it's sort of in between.
That's true.
The Mark Swayze stuff. I mean,
you're right about that. That's outstanding, man.
But the Raboy stuff was so slick and so interesting to look at. And I love that Dave Cockrum was able to recreate it when he did his Captain Marvel Jr. stories in the back of Shazam in the 70s. You take a look at those? Sure.
That's true. That's a good point, man. Oh, God. Yeah. That was a really interesting time in the early 70s when they got the rights to the Marvel stuff, the Fawcett Marvel stuff. And even what Jerry did, Ordway, in the 80s, and all the Fawcett heroes that he played with during his run of power of Shazam.
It's, in the 70s when DC got the rights from Fawcett, they gave it to Julie because he was the fix-it guy. Not sure Julie was temperamentally the right person for it. Same as Denny as the writer going out.
And he wrote them, yeah.
Yeah. E. Nelson Bridwell was spot on perfect for it. But by then, C.C. Beck was like, I'm done with this.
Yeah, it's a shame.
The scripts and was, very vocal about it. That was, to me, a missed opportunity. Although we got the beautiful Dave Cockrum, Captain Marvel Jr., the beautiful Bob Oxner, Mary Marvel backups. It was the lead stories that didn't quite connect. But really wasn't until Jerry Ordway and Peter Krause's Power Shazam series that really found a way to integrate Captain Marvel in the DCU.
Agreed. You know that, and again, our discussion is telling me, back of my head, I got to have Jerry back on and really go into the stuff he did with the Fawcett characters. Interesting stuff.
Oh God, I remember he brought back Spy Smasher. Did he bring back Mr. Scarlet and Pinky?
I don't know about that, but I remember Bullet Man too. So
yes, Bullet Man, yes, absolutely, because I remember those great painted covers.
Absolutely, and I think Oh, actually, I think Wade recently in Shazam had iBiz or a legacy version of iBiz.
Right, because the stick is really where the power is.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. No, man. Again, these concepts and these characters, they just need the right creator behind them to really bring them back and dust them up.
Pretty much what Mark keeps telling people.
100%. I know. I am so glad. I mean, and I really think Wade did great stuff at Marvel while he was there in his exile from DC.
Oh God, yeah.
Again, Mark knows how to take the old concepts, put a modern spin on them. One of my favorite things he's ever done, he did a limited series of The Invisible Woman, Sue Storm.
Yes,
and it's like, why did we wait decades for finally we get Sue Storm right front and center? She doesn't need the rest of the FF, just like the Thing didn't, just like Johnny Storm didn't with the Human Torch. It's like, give Sue her own book, man, and it was a wonderful book. I
read comics all the time, but I infrequently will reach out to a creator and say, this really, worked. That was one. But when I read the trade paperback of that, it was like, hey, Mark, about time. A beautiful job.
100%.
The stuff he did with Chris Samney on Daredevil and Black Widow, and then with Adam Kubert on Captain America, he knew how to write these guys. He knew where to find the strengths.
100%, man. A couple final comments from everybody.
Sure.
Ken Dog says, love the Power of Shazam hardcover graphic novel that kicked off the series. Absolutely. And then Johan says, Titan Books in England has published some beautiful collections of daily strips. And yes, they keep representing the James Bond daily comic strip.
Oh, that Holdaway art is gorgeous.
Unbelievable, everybody. You really, if you're a James Bond fan and you're not reading these strips, you're really missing out, because it was some incredible adaptations of the Fleming novels. Great stuff. McCluskey, I want to say John McCluskey was one of the main artists, and also their depiction of James Bond was literally 4 years before Connery was cast as Bond.
That's correct.
And you've got to think they were thinking of what was in the Daily Mail and when they were casting Bond, because it's uncanny how much the 1958 Dr. No looks like 1962 movie Bond.
Which is really interesting, considering Ian Fleming always said, he had David Niven in his mind.
Absolutely. See? This is why we talk, Bob, because again, we have these. You were like that older brother and older cousin of mine handing me the Doc Savage and Shadow paperbacks, and it's like, yeah, you like comics, you'll love this stuff, and it's like, yes, I will. Thank you very much. Great talking as always, Bob. Seriously, continued success. BobGreenberger.com to find Bob's books, and again, he does apparently have copies of The Art of Ramona Fradon. There it is. Yeah, there we go. And again, it's on. If you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read it that way as well. But I would say again, it's come on, it's Ramona's amazing art. It's worth the purchase.
No question.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bob. I really appreciate it, man. And definitely, we'll talk this summer. So yeah, see you soon. Thanks everybody for watching. Tomorrow night, Matt Fraction is coming on. We talked at the beginning of the Monarch Godzilla TV series, and never did the wrap up. So if you want to join us tomorrow night, we'll be talking about that and a whole lot more with Matt Fraction. So join us then. Until next time. Here, I got to find the close. There it is. Everybody, stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.